What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Ice the Kicker with Matt Ferrara. My name is Glen and We are 14 days away from the NFL draft, the biggest date on the NFL offseason calendar. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is projected to go number one to the Jacksonville Jaguars. There might be three quarterbacks taken consecutively right after that, with the Jets, with the 49ers, with the Falcons. So we'll see how that goes. Something that, a lot of NFL analysts say about drafting quarterbacks and really drafting anyone to be the face of the franchise, whether it be Kobe and Michael Jordan in the NBA, whether it be a guy like Jeter in baseball, is that they want these guys that are like alpha dogs, guys that are just obsessed with winning, like a dangerous, unhealthy obsession with winning. That's what we got from guys like Kobe Bryant. That's what we get from guys like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, same way. You want your face of the franchise to be eat, sleep, breathe, live, die, winning a Super Bowl. That should be the ultimate goal if you're drafting first overall a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are predominantly and historically a team that's kind of like a team that's always overlooked, team that's always pushed to the side, not like great historic franchise. So for the first overall picked in the draft, Matt, the Jaguars have an opportunity with the quarterbacks that are available to get that guy, right? To get that guy that's going to change the franchise for the next, not only for the next 10, 15 years of that player's career, but change the culture for the next 50 years and make them really an established Super Bowl franchise that people take seriously. So today, there was a weird interview with not only Trevor Lawrence, but his wife and his father, basically saying that, there's more to life than football, and then how he doesn't want to be judged by how often he wins. And that, the father said something along the lines of he'd be comfortable with leaving the NFL tomorrow if it came down to that. I have the exact quotes right in front of me. So Trevor Lawrence says, in terms of being in that Michael Jordan mindset where you have to win at all costs, he says, and I quote, "I think that's just unhealthy. Just always thinking that you've got to prove somebody wrong. You've got to do better. You got to be better." His father, he's not, "I want to win a Super Bowl at all costs" kind of person. His high school coach came out and said he could walk away from it tomorrow and be fine. 14 days away from the draft, and you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you see those quotes, and you're Urban Meyer, who's one of those guys that's win or failure. Do you have any new hesitations over drafting Trevor Lawrence, first overall pick in the draft?
I mean, I think the hesitation definitely is there. I mean, I'm still going to pull the trigger on him, but I mean, you look at those quotes and the first part that he said about how it's unhealthy to kind of always have to prove yourself and stuff like that. I get that. I could get behind that. Maybe it's a way he kind of goes about the game to make it a little less pressure for himself. Like I'm all for that. That's fine. But the quote from his dad saying he's not, "I want to win a Super Bowl at all costs." That's a little troubling to hear. Now I'm hoping that is taken out of context, but that to me just doesn't make any sense. How are you going to appoint the leader of your franchise, give him the keys to your city, and you're going to have this kid that's going to be basically your team leader and team captain, and he's going to be a not going to win a Super Bowl at all costs guy? Like, how do you get behind that? Like, people on the Jaguars and even Urban Meyer have to look at that and be like, what is that? What did he really mean? Like, that's kind of strange to see. Like, there's this, how can you be on an NFL team and lead the team and be the quarterback and not be a guy who's willing to kind of lay it all out there on the field? It almost seems like he's making business decisions, or his dad is speaking for him, that he's making kind of some business decisions before he even steps foot on the field. So that definitely a little troublesome to hear.
Yeah, I just don't understand how, after those comments are made, Trevor Lawrence can look at the other 54 guys in that locker room and be the leader of them. That's really tough. The ultimate goal for every single team and every player in the NFL is to reach the top of that mountain and win a Super Bowl. If your quarterback doesn't feel that way, the rest of the roster is going to follow. I mean, it's one thing if your running back says that, or your safety says that, or your linebacker says that, or a cornerback or secondary guy says that. That's just one guy. In the grand scheme of things, that's not going to make a difference. But the big difference here is that it's a quarterback. And this is a very highly sought after quarterback, probably the most highly sought after college quarterback in the last decade. And for him to not be on board with the main goal to win a Super Bowl, I'd be concerned. And I thought about this driving. I was driving on the Parkway today and then listening to WRFAN. They were discussing this very same thing. And there was a good point that was made, and it made me think if the Jets were at one, that would not fly in New York City. Like, that is absolutely something that just would not be an acceptable thing to say for a Jets organization that, hasn't won the Super Bowl in 53 years. They haven't had a real quarterback since Joe Namath all those 53 years ago. So I was thinking if this was a situation where New York had to deal with that, they might pass on him. Now, I don't think the Jaguars will pass on him. I agree. I think he's going to go number one. And, he's talented enough where he could win the Super Bowl and he can still feel the same way about not, being judged on Super Bowls because, Super Bowls are a team accomplishment. I'm sure it's not fair. Your guy, Dan Marino, I'm sure it's not fair that he gets looked down upon in comparison to Brady and Montana and Elway and all those guys as top grades because he didn't win the Super Bowl. Maybe that's the angle that he was taking. Maybe he was trying to say, I don't need a Super Bowl to be an all-time great because, for example, Dan Marino doesn't have one. A lot of people don't have one. But for you to come out 2 weeks before the draft and tell the prospective fan base that you're going to get drafted into, hey, I'm not really a Super Bowl or bust guy, that's kind of weird, and that's kind of concerning to me if I was a Jaguars fan. Now, I feel like most players are probably more like Lawrence. Like, we look at Brady and we look at Jordan, and while we admire them and we think they're fantastic and they're great and we look up to them, we do realize that that's not normal behavior, right? To be so obsessed with winning. Like, we think Michael Jordan, and you watch the documentary last year and you're like, this guy's psychotic, like, right? Psychotic's not normally a positive connotation to have towards a person. So maybe we as fans or people in the media are overreacting to these quotes, but 2 weeks before the draft, organization that hasn't sniffed a Super Bowl ever, that's just not the right foot to start out your NFL career with.
Yeah, it's weird because, again, you bring up a good point talking about how like it may not be, or it may be the norm to kind of have this kind of personality. And again, it's different in the sense because we look at a personality like that where you're not as cutthroat as a Michael Jordan, meaning, hey, people want to go out there, they want to get paid. I understand that. But with Super Bowls comes payment, comes big fat checks, comes big fat bonuses. So it's very strange. And also, so kind of tying that into the other quote, his high school coach saying he could walk away from it tomorrow and be fine. That's where I would even get now more nervous because now he doesn't even care about, say, getting a nice paycheck. So what are his motivations? And that's kind of where I would want to listen more and kind of try to gain some more context of these discussions here, because you hope there's got to be something like what is driving him to keep playing at that elite level and keep striving to be great and get better and better and better. Like, you don't want to see someone kind of just hit a plateau. I mean, imagine if Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, especially, who's been getting so much crap so far this offseason, imagine if he came out and these quotes were kind of tagged on him. He would be absolutely destroyed more than he already has. Same with Zach Wilson. If these kind of quotes came out with Zach Wilson, I'm sure the Jets would have second thoughts. So I think Trevor Lawrence is just so good, and he's been kind of so sought after that he has a little more leeway where, hey, he's still going to go number one. But any of these other 2, 3, or 4 quarterbacks, like, if these quotes were tied to them, I'd be very interested to see how fan bases and fans would react, and then also GMs as far as if they would pick them.
I mean, it should be said that still Trevor Lawrence is so sought after for good reasons. One, he's an extraordinary talent, but two, in Clemson, he did win. So it's not like he packed it in and didn't win. So he's proven that he can win, even though that's not what he claims to be, his goals, like his main priorities. But when that's not your main priority, and then your high school coach says he can walk away at any moment, what is your goal as an NFL quarterback? That would be my first question to Trevor Lawrence if I was the Jaguars personnel interviewing him I'm not sure how the draft interview process is going under COVID. I'm sure it's virtual.
Mhm.
But my first question would be, you said Super Bowl is not, but boom or bust in your, life. And your high school coach says you can walk away at any moment. So what exactly is Trevor Lawrence's motives, and what's his narrative, and what does he want out of his NFL experience? That's something that needs to be figured out, because you can you can say, oh, Super Bowl doesn't mean that much to me, but what does mean that much to me is playing 15 years and breaking all these records. And that's fine, because with all those records being broken over those 15 years, you could probably run into a Super Bowl by accident, and he'll be a Hall of Fame player. And the Jaguars, because of him being a Hall of Fame player, will be a successful organization. But when you also say that you can walk away at any moment, who's to say after year 4, Trevor Lawrence is like, you know what, I don't want to play football anymore. And then where's the Jaguars organization now, spending their first overall pick on this guy who's supposed to be amazing, and then he quits out of nowhere? That I just feel like that's something that they need. Maybe we're just making so much out of it that doesn't need to be. So comment below if you think we're, being crazy, but it's just not a good look 14 days before the draft. And as I said before, God forbid it was the Jets in New York City he said that to. That would be a much bigger problem than Jacksonville, Florida. No offense to Jacksonville.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And again, I know we said it before that he's still probably going to go 1 overall, but it's just when you like what you said, you think about 4 years in the future, like, what are his motivations going to be? Is he someone who's kind of just, hey, maybe he's burnt out from the stardom. He's been great for his whole entire life. Football is just kind of secondary right now. And that it just, as a franchise, and you're investing so much, just millions of dollars in time and draft assets, like you're definitely taking on a little bit bigger of a risk than you may have originally thought. Like if Trevor Lawrence were to come out and say, like, oh my God, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make my teammates better and carry them to a championship. I don't care what it's going to take. I'm going to bring this, that, and the other to the city of Jacksonville. Like, that would get me pumped up. This does not get me as excited to draft Trevor Lawrence.
And I was surprised he couldn't even lie. Like, even if he believes what he did say, you still should just lie and say, yeah, I want to win a Super Bowl at all costs. That can't hurt you. That can only help.
Yeah.
So it's very, like, obviously we appreciate the honesty, and that's the best policy. Obviously, that's what our parents teach us. But why now are you saying, because he's been in the public spotlight since, early college days, years from now, we've been hearing about this guy. Why 14 days before the draft is he now saying that this is not the biggest passion of his life? Just very interesting to me, and very, very, very weird. I don't think I've ever heard this before from a athlete of his caliber. So we'll definitely see what happened. That's definitely something that's going to come back if he struggles, especially.
Yes.
Like if he doesn't play well right off the bat, he's the number 1 overall pick. The criticism is going to be he doesn't love football. And that's kind of the criticism that another guy that went first overall, Cam Newton, got. Remember Cam Newton, even when he was in his prime in Carolina, everybody was like, this guy doesn't love football as much. He just likes going to the press conference in his, funky outfits. How much does he actually love football? That's something that team, as silly as it sounds, that's something that teams and organizations and GMs and head coaches really care about. They want your number 1 quarterback to be obsessed with football and, watch game tape for fun. Now, not everyone's like that, but you would want your first overall pick, face of the franchise, to be like that. So something to definitely keep an eye on, not only for the next 14 days, but just throughout Trevor Lawrence's career, because this will always come back to him because he said it. Yeah. So now every time he struggles, it's going to be like this. So let's talk about the draft, because it is 14 days away. There's a bunch of other picks that are going to be made after Trevor Lawrence. And it's shaping out to be a very heavy quarterback top 10. We talked about it a little bit last week. We talked a lot about Justin Wilson being the guy for the Jets after trading Sam Darnold to the Indianapolis
Justin
Colts.
Wilson?
What did I say?
You said Justin Wilson. Your
sorry.
eyes are on the Yankees
Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson. Justin Fields is going to be a little bit later, it seems. So it looks like Zach Wilson's the guy for the Jets. Third, San Francisco. They can say all they want about how much they love Jimmy G. You're not making that trade if you're not picking. Doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, I don't believe in it. So you're probably going to trade Jimmy G, maybe draft day, maybe draft night, maybe a couple days before. We can get into where we think he might fit.
Mhm.
Niners, do they go Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields? Then there's Atlanta. What do they do? What quarterback do they take? Do they trade Matt Ryan? Do they have the young quarterback learn under Matt Ryan for a year or two? And then the rest of the top 10 filters out with teams like ours, with the Dolphins and Giants coming
Mhm.
in. Giants are at 11, Dolphins are at 6. You got the Eagles. It's going to be a fascinating top 10, and so many different things are in the air. You've done multiple mock drafts on Caps
Mhm.
On. Great job by you, by the way.
Appreciate that.
So what's the overall vibe 14 days out of what we can possibly see on draft day?
So you prefaced it nicely and said that it's going to be very quarterback heavy. Now, I think you could potentially see 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And that would be crazy to think about because you go back to last year. I know you had 4, but Jordan Love doesn't really count too much because he hasn't seen the field yet. So it's going to be interesting to see 1, 2, 3. You know they're going quarterback. So the big storyline is kind of all right. You know it's going to be Lawrence, and for some reason the Jets are just tip their hand and say, hey, we're going Wilson no matter what. So you have those 2 locked up. Now, there were some Mac Jones rumors to the Niners, but I'm just not buying that. I mean, you see a guy like Justin Fields and how athletic he is, and I feel like he could do whatever Mac Jones can do, but just with some more mobility. So that to me seems like a slam dunk. I think the most interesting pick is going to be the Falcons at 4. I know they kind of flirted that 4th overall pick to some teams and said, hey, we're open for business if you want to make us a deal. So clearly they're not in love with any quarterbacks there. And clearly they're not in love with any of the elite pass catchers or even the top 2 offensive tackles in Slater and Penei Sewell there either, or else they would just say, hey, we're going to lock this up. So it seems like they're looking for some crazy, maybe desperate offer from a team like maybe Washington, maybe Chicago, maybe New England too. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But the biggest thing is if they stay at 4, what do you do? And that is going to answer, I think, a lot of questions, and it's going to help obviously our 2 teams out too. If we're looking for elite pass catchers, if they go quarterback, that makes our lives even easier. And if they trade out, and then obviously if they say trade with New England, they're obviously going to go quarterback too. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Atlanta does because that also will kind of tip the hand as, hey, how is Matt Ryan's career going to finish up? Is it going to finish up in Atlanta? Do they make a draft day trade like you said? So I think all eyes right now are on Atlanta with that 4th overall pick to kind of see what they do, and everything else is going to kind of stem from that.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations that will be sitting on that 4th pick to see what Atlanta does because you got to think that Lawrence will go 1. Zach Wilson. I said Justin Wilson because he's a reliever for the Yankees, and the Yankees have been on my mind a lot, unfortunately, the last days because they suck. So Zach Wilson will probably go 2 to the Jets. The 49ers, would you say would you say they get Fields at 3?
I think Fields makes the most sense.
So let's say they get Fields, and then Atlanta's sitting there. And the thing with Atlanta is that they hold kind of the key to the rest of the draft for a lot of these organizations, teams that need quarterbacks but are later in the draft. The Patriots, for example, are one of those teams. Now, do the Patriots see the first 3 quarterbacks go off the board, which we're all thinking will happen, but when reality strikes and that does happen, does Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft panic a little bit because they're like, oh my God, we need to get a quarterback. And let's say Garoppolo isn't available or he gets shipped somewhere else. Now all of a sudden Atlanta's sitting pretty, can get a haul for the 4th pick because Mac Jones is the only one available. I know Trask is still there, but I think there's a gap between the top 4 and then Kyle Trask at Florida. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
Yeah. I agree.
So do the Patriots panic? Does, another quarterback team, maybe potentially the Las Vegas Raiders panic? Does the Washington football team panic? I think that when you see that on the clock number, I think we can potentially see Atlanta dwindle down to the very last seconds to field all the kinds of offers they get. I think they're in a really good position because even if they don't get a quarterback, they still have Matt Ryan, who, when helped out, could still be a very productive quarterback in the NFL. And they might just pick Sewell to protect him or pick one of the pass rushers. So I think there's a lot of things in the air for Atlanta to do it for.
Yeah. Again, they're in a great spot. Unfortunately for them, Obviously, the Dolphins were originally a 3 and traded up with San Fran, so that kind of set the market there for what they could potentially get. And then also it took away a potential team that is willing to trade up that far.
Yeah, probably
Now,
took away
a team,
Fields too.
I mean, yeah, definitely there. I would say. Now it's interesting to look at because all the teams that could potentially trade up would take Atlanta into the mid-teens, maybe even the 20s, depending on what the team is. So you're not for them to kind of really look at that. One, it hurts their team in the now, assuming it's say Matt Ryan, hey, you're not going to get the Kyle Pitts or the Devontae Smiths or the Jalen Waddles or Jamar Chases. You're not even going to get the Penny Sewells. You're not going to get the Rashawn Slaters. So you must really bank on a nice kind of fat haul that's going to really help you out in the future. But again, what does that do for you right now? And that's what kind of what they have to answer to themselves. And that's kind of why I'm more so leaning they're going to stay there because they need to be good now. They need that either elite pass catcher or that elite offensive tackle to help out Matt Ryan now in these next 2 years to try to get them kind of back on the right track. Or then you could say maybe if they're really not in a rush, you go with the more kind of experimental quarterback in Trey Lance and you have him sit under Matt Ryan for a couple years. Them getting Mac Jones,
and you could trade back to get Trey Lance. You can trade back.
I think so too. Yeah.
You can trade back out of the top 10, probably in the teens. You have New England at 15, right? You have the Vikings at 14, Washington at 19. I think even Chicago at 20. I think there's an avenue there for Trey Lance to be there if they want to capitalize on acquiring multiple draft picks for the 4 pick and then get the quarterback in the later round, get Lance at the later round. That's something that they could consider. Instead of just getting Mac Jones, they can get Trey Lance plus other future picks. That's something that they can do. I think that, organizationally, they're at a crossroads, right? Because they went to that Super Bowl 3 or 4 years ago, should have won that Super Bowl. We all know what happened. And then since then have been very disappointing trying to get back to where they were. So it might be a situation where their owner is like, listen, I think with this core and this group, we got to as far as we were probably going to go. That one Super Bowl was our shot with this group of guys. Let's get let's start over now and try to rebuild and get back there in 2 to 3, 4 years. Because how likely is it in an NFC that's, that has, the Packers still playing very well, the Buccaneers still playing very well, defending Super Bowl champions. The Saints, they're regrouping. They're going to have Jameis. Their roster's still very good. Where does this NFC landscape? Where do they fit over the next 2 or 3 years in the short term to be a contender? Is that a roster where it's beneficial to add on to it instead of ripping it apart and tearing it down, building back up?
And again, that's a question that many teams have to ask themselves. And they might be in a situation where they're in kind of a forced rebuild. Hey, you have Matt Ryan, you have Julio Jones, you have Calvin Ridley, 3 elite pieces there, but you just don't really have much else besides that. And they're
getting older.
That's the case. That's what especially Matt Ryan and definitely, Julio Jones. It's like, listen, like, it's awesome that we have you, but you almost have to just take the L and say, listen, we didn't do anything with you. That's on us. Now, as an organization, especially because you have a new coach and GM coming in, maybe we at least try to salvage these players and you get some draft capital in return, or you trade them for some younger guys, something, because there's going to be teams who want Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and want Matt Ryan. So you might have to, unfortunately, again, it sucks, obviously, but it's better than paying them all this money and still being in the position you're in. And now that's what the Falcons have to ask themselves, to be like, listen, are we ever going to be in that 4th overall pick again? And in their eyes, you're praying no, because that means you did terrible. And that's what I mean. If they see a quarterback there, even if he is QB4, if they like him, or if they love him and they love a Lance, or they love a Mac Jones, or they love Fields if he drops for whatever reason, then maybe you just pull the trigger, and then maybe you kind of clear house a little bit, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I think that's something that they're going to need to decide. The fan base probably won't like it, because that would probably be waving the white flag for 2021, 22, maybe even 23. But Are you realistically, if you didn't win that Super Bowl with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and all those guys 3-4 years ago,
Mhm.
what are the odds that you're going to get back there with this core this year or next year? I just don't see it.
Yeah.
So they're sitting pretty at 4. They have a lot of different things that they can do.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
they can pick now, they can pick later, or they can pick for now, or they can pick for the future. Something that the
Mhm.
Giants were in a few years ago, and they picked for now. They picked Barkley, and it didn't work out
Mhm.
because they're still hovering around the top 10. So
Mhm.
do they look at previous draft mistakes not only from themselves but other teams that were in similar situations over the last couple years and say, hey, let's not fall into the trap of believing that we could win this year. Instead, let's
Mhm.
just build for next year. We can build a sustainable winning product for that'll last a decade. I think that's something they should think about.
Something
Go ahead.
real quick on that part you mentioned taking Saquon. Now, I was kind of reading up on just positional value. And then you always hear the terms with the draft, all right, draft for team need or best player available, all that good stuff. Now, I want at 18 for the Dolphins' second first round pick, Najee Harris, running back. Now, I've been a big proponent in not paying for running backs and free agency, paying them that 14, 15, 60 million dollars. And I was even kind of outspoken with Saquon too that, hey, that doesn't really make much sense with that second overall pick, even how great he is.
Mm,
Now, I've been kind of reading up and getting some comments on Twitter and stuff like that about, hey, the Dolphins or any team for that matter, you should be drafting with that first round pick either quarterback, edge, or offensive lineman. Reason being, in 4 to 5 years, whenever they kind of come out of that rookie contract, what are those second contracts like financially? And that's where I kind of light bulb went off my head. All right, well, the quarterback franchise tag is probably what, 28, 25 million, something like that. The
mm.
offensive lineman franchise tag, I'm pretty sure is upwards of 15, 16. And then you look at that edge rusher franchise tag is close to 16, 17, 18 almost. So when you think about it in that regard, that's kind of why running backs have just kind of been just kind of crapped on for a little bit because when you franchise tag them, it's what 8, 9, 10 million, maybe something like that.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting when you think about it that regard. And then obviously the toughest part is, hey, if there's no offensive lineman or edge or quarterback that you need, then what do you do? But from a financial standpoint, I thought that was a pretty interesting topic to look at.
With the Dolphins, though, I just think that there's such a good spot that everything that we kind of like learned about the draft and what to do in terms of financial situations and who to
Hmm.
draft at what pick, where you are in the draft. I think for the Dolphins this year, you just throw it out the window because they went 11-5. They missed the playoffs by inches, and they have all
Hmm.
these picks that rebuilding teams would want to have, and they're
Yeah.
11-5. So if you could waste one per se, not the right word,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. If waste
I
one
get what
on
you
a
mean.
running
Yeah.
waste one on a running back, they
Just
have that ability
unconventional.
to
Yeah. Hmm.
absorb that because they're so
Yeah.
close already, and they have this embarrassment of riches in terms of draft
Hmm.
capital. So while what you're saying is right, I think the Dolphins are in a position where they can just say, fuck it, we'll get the running back. I don't
Agreed.
care. So
Yeah.
that's something that every football fan should want, and you have it. So congratulations. But
Yeah.
we will get to the Dolphins in a second. I
Yeah.
want to just go down the list of the top 10. I
Hmm.
had this conversation with my brother Nick a couple days
Hmm.
ago in terms of the Bengals and what they should do. Should they get the pass catcher to help Burrow, or should they get the lineman from Oregon, Sewell, to protect Burrow? Now, my argument was, I think the couple of podcasts ago, I said I would rather have the receiver first round pick and just build the offensive lineman through free agency, through trades, and get like a
Hmm.
veteran. But I
Yeah.
think this case is special because Burrow is probably out for the majority, if not the entirety, of this next season. So
Hmm.
if you get a Jamar Chase or a Devontae Smith at 5, and your quarterback is whoever, right? Is that really helping you? Instead, would it be more beneficial for the Bengals to put the wide receiver pick on hold for another year because you'll think they'll have a top 10 pick in the draft next year as well because there'll be no Burrow, and that division's still tough, and get Sewell, and by the time Burrow is back in 2022, that rookie rust that a lot of offensive linemen have in their first year of their career will be gone, and they could have Burrow back in year 2 and a second 1 year under his belt Sewell, and they can just run and they can get the wide receiver a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of been back and forth on this a lot too, but I think as of right now, and I've been for the last couple weeks, I think you have to go Sewell. I mean, you need to shore up that line for Burrow, for whatever future first round, say, wide receivers you want to pick, or big name free agents. And then again, financially looking at it again, you look at Corey Linsley, who just signed the biggest center contract in the National Football League history. It was upwards of like 16 or 17 mil a year. Joe Thuney, he was up there too, around like 18 mil a year. You have guys like Will Fuller, who signed with the Dolphins, 10 mil. Juju Smith-Schuster, 7 mil a year. So you can still get very good quality receivers in free agency. And obviously there's a ton in the draft. They can even get one in the second round this year. But these premier, and then Sewell is 100% a premier offensive tackle. I mean, that position and that type of player can pay dividends for the whole entire offense, not just the passing game. He does it in the running game too. And he protects your franchise quarterback who you invested that first overall pick in last year, who's also coming off an injury. So I think if he didn't get injured, maybe you say, all right, we can go wide receiver, maybe. But the fact that he did get injured, I think, is definitely, hey, you have to protect him literally and physically.
I agree 1,000%. If Burrow stayed healthy and, lit it up, because he was playing well before he got hurt, and he lit it up and he won Offensive Rookie of the Year, maybe you go into this draft and say, hey, let's get him a weapon and let's see what this kid could really do. But he almost got his leg decapitated. Let's call it as it is. Like, he almost career almost ended, and it's going to be a long time before we see him again. It might be another year and a half, because he might miss the entirety of next year, because he might come back. He might be ready to come back around November, but at that point, if Cincinnati's 1-7, why do that? So if we're gonna wait so long for Burrow, get Sewell, have him have his rookie mistakes with a guy who's not going to be part of the future under center. I know that's kind of a dark thing to say, because you don't want any quarterback getting hurt, but I'd rather have Sewell have his rookie lumps with somebody else other than Burrow under center. So you get that kind of like practice season under Sewell's wings. And then, as I said before, Burrow comes back. Sewell is an established offensive lineman in the NFL. And then at that point, now you can get Burrow a weapon. And then in 2022, you can let it fly and see what happens, because, Ben will probably be gone by that point. Who knows what Jackson, he's a stud, but the Ravens at times have looked vulnerable. And then obviously, the same thing could be said about the Browns and Baker Mayfield. So looking at 2022, that's probably when that organization, I'm talking about Cincinnati, goes for it. With the star pass catching sexy weapon in the draft. So let's say Jacksonville takes Lawrence, the Jets take Wilson, Niners take Fields, Falcons take Jones, Bengals take Sewell. We're at your Dolphins at 6. So the Dolphins worked around. We talked about it last episode. They are at 3, went to 12, went to 6 with the Eagles. So now you're at 6. And now if our draft that we're kind of doing right now works out, they're going to have a buffet of weapons that they can choose from. They can have Pitts, they can have Smith, they can have Chase, they can have Waddle. They can have literally anyone they want. So at 6, who is your guy on April 15th that you want to be the number one weapon for Tua?
Again, it's so hard to look at these guys. I think they're all great. I mean, Pitts, Waddle, Smith, and Jamar Chase. But again, I'm when I watch film on these guys and I think about instant impact, not he's going to be good a year from now, 2 years from now. I think about instant impact.
They need instant because they need to make the playoffs this year, because they were 11-5 last year. This isn't a 4-12 team.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, they're close, but you need weapons. And then when I think weapons, and I think in this day and age, I just think explosive, and I think speed. And every time I watch highlights of Jalen Waddle, I'm like, I need that. I want that. And again, people are like, oh, he's just a slot receiver. That's not true. He played on the outside, he played on the inside, play wherever you need him. He could be a running back if you need to give him a little jet sweep too. When I look at that guy, that to me is a game plan nightmare for defenses. And that's not to say that these other guys aren't, because I think they're all great athletes and great prospects too. But when I see Jalen Waddle, I see a guy right there who you could plug in on week one and you just say, damn, this kid's going to make some noise and he's going to light it up, especially as he has that chemistry with Tua. So right now, I started off on the Waddle train, got convinced a little bit to go to Pitts or Chase. Now I'm back on the Waddle train. There's too much speed there to pass up on.
So the gold standard in the NFL, to me, even though they lost the Super Bowl, is the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs are just this electric offense. Even though they lost to the Buccaneers and maybe a new blueprint of how to beat them is out there, you still can't deny what they've accomplished over the last 3 years. 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl win. The other year was an AFC Conference Championship game that they lost in overtime. I think they've been 13-3 at least the last 3 years. So they're the gold standard of the NFL. And why is Mahomes so good other than his God-given natural ability is that the weapons he has. And the weapons he has, the top 2 are Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Now, if you're the Dolphins and you're trying to emulate the gold standard of the NFL and you believe that Tua is going to be your Patrick Mahomes, will he ever get there? Probably not. But if he can be a Patrick Mahomes, if he can be a Patrick Mahomes light, where he can do some of the things that Patrick Mahomes can do, he could be if he could be a franchise quarterback, you got your guy. How are you going to emulate the Kelce or the Hill? So the Kelce, you could take Pitts, or the Hill, you can take Waddle. So basically, you're saying what I'm trying to compare is who's more important to Mahomes. Is it Kelce, who's that reliable, especially on third down and short in the red zone? Is it Kelce, that reliable pass catching tight end, or is it the guy in Hill that can bail Mahomes out when he's in trouble and just throw 50 yards down the field and he'll be there? We saw that in the Super Bowl against the 49ers. We saw that in that week 3 game against the Chargers. We see it every week with Hill. So in my opinion, I want Tyreek Hill, who could in 20 seconds go 80 yards and have a quick score when you need it when you're down. Not to take anything away from the tight end or Kelce, but I think you could get another tight end that could do the things that a Kelce or a Gronk or, any other the great who's the 49ers, Kittle, those guys. You can find those guys more than you can find a guy like Waddle or Hill whose speed can't be taught, right? You can teach a tight end how to catch. You can teach him how to run the correct route. You can teach him how to be reliable on short down and distances. What you can't teach is that blazing speed. And I think that's what Waddle has that nobody else in the draft has. And I think I agree with you. I think that's where you probably would want to go if you're Miami, because that's just something that doesn't come around every single year.
Yeah. And that's, first of all, that's an amazing analogy there with the Kelce and Pitts and then the Waddle and Hill there. Like that's awesome. And then again, when you compare it to the Dolphins, not to say Mike Gesicki is like Travis Kelce, but he is a more receiving tight end. And it's kind of weird when you think about it, that people are like, oh, well, this tight end position is kind of like being revolutionized. Not really. Like you look at Vernon Davis, he was a receiving tight end. You look at Jimmy Graham, he was a receiving tight end. I mean, when you go
Jeremy
down,
Shockey, there's forever.
Exactly. When you go down and you look at these draft kind of scouting reports of these tight ends, a lot of them are these 6'6" kids who are converted basketball players. And once you see that, it means they are a receiving tight end. That's how it is. So it's weird to me because, again, and I think Kyle Pitts is a great player, and obviously Kelce and Kittle and Darren Waller too, they're all phenomenal players and they're the top of their class. But when it comes down to people who could catch the ball, I'm going with a guy like Hill. I'm going with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going with a guy like Devontae Adams, like pure wide receivers. So that to me again, and you prefaced it perfectly too, saying, hey, you hit Hill on a 3-yard pass, he could take that thing 80 yards to the house. That's what the Dolphins need, and I think that's what every team in the NFL needs. And if you don't have that, I think that's where you're going to kind of lack a little bit. If you don't have those dynamic, explosive playmakers that can make it easier for your quarterback and for your offense.
Yeah, and I think that's something that will really help, and it will really patch up issues that your other facets of your game have. Like if you have a struggling offensive line, I don't know much about the Dolphins' offensive line. Are they average?
They're young.
Okay,
average,
so if they're average and young, Tua's gonna be in trouble sometimes. And when you could dump it off to Waddle and he takes a slant 85 yards, that's gonna shore up a lot of problems with the offensive line because Tua doesn't need to 5-step drop and wait for something to happen. You can just do a quick 2-step drop, sling it over to Waddle on a 3-yard slant, and he does the rest. That's something that you really can't do with Pitts because for how good Pitts is and how fast he is, a tight end's route still takes a little bit, right?
Yes.
Especially if you send him out, right? Yeah. So, I think Waddle works. I think Waddle really works. They were teammates in Alabama, right? Or am I mistaken?
Yep. Yeah,
they were. So there's that familiarity. I agree. I think Waddle's, first of all, there's no bad pick for the Dolphins. And I think you should be very, happy that there's no bad pick for the Dolphins. Like they're not going to pick Pitts and all of Miami is going to freak out.
Oh no. Yeah.
Pitts. They're going to be fine with whoever they pick. And I think that's an awesome thing for Miami. But I think Waddle's fun. I think Waddle is an exciting pick. And I agree. I'll defer to the Dolphins guy. I think Waddle would be really good in that aqua jersey that Miami has. Next at 7 is Detroit. Detroit traded Stafford. They have Goff now, so they won't be taking Lance under our makeshift mock draft that this show turned into. But they could go either way. They can go defense. This is the first time where I think defense is possible on a pick.
Yeah.
Or they could try to get Goff a weapon because, Goff, he's not the perfect quarterback. He's not the number 1 first overall pick that he was supposed to be. So as much help as possible in Detroit will help him. I don't want the Tigers. I don't want the Lions to pick a wide receiver because that'll be one less for the Giants to pick from. But I can see a scenario where Detroit will go to the next or the best player available after the Dolphins pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think them losing Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay, and then keep in mind they invested a first rounder in TJ Hawkinson, a tight end, makes it seem all right. It's probably not Pitts, so you would assume, I think, pretty heavily that they're going to go, say, like a Jamar Chase, a kind of best pass catcher available here. And that's where, like you said, too, as a Giants fan who's hoping for one of the top 4 pass catchers here, you're like, well, shit. Now, Dolphins already picked one, and the Lions are probably definitely slated to get another one. Now you're sitting at pick 8 with the Panthers, and you have 8, 9, and 10, and then they're at 11. So you have 2 pass catchers left with 3 spots to go. It's going to be an interesting draft night.
Yeah, I'm going to be sweating that out. I think Detroit will. I think you're right. I think they'll take Smith or Waddle or whoever's not there. It might be Pitts, to be honest with you. I think it might be Pitts because everyone's very high on Pitts, even though we might not want the tight end because you have a pass catching tight end and pretty hell-bent on Waddle. I just feel like it'd be redundant to take Ingram a few years ago in the first round and then take another tight end in the first round. Not that I don't like Pitts. I just think that's redundant at that point.
Yeah.
But I think let's just go with Pitts. I think that'll help Goff. Detroit needs a lot. So even with Pitts and with Goff, there's still a lot of work to be done with Detroit. They're just a team that's just always in a rebuild. They're always rebuilding. And it sucks because, that's a historic franchise. They go back to the beginning. And that's a fan base that loves their Lions and loves their sports. So it's a shame that, they can never figure it out. So hopefully with the new decision makers they have in town, that whoever they pick helps them out, because I think that would be good for the sport, because they're on Thanksgiving every year. Remember, we went on that huge rant.
Yes.
It's bullshit that they keep playing on Thanksgiving, even though they suck. So we'll see what happens there. 8 with Carolina. They have Darnold now, right? They have
Yeah.
McCaffrey. They have Darnold's former teammate in New York, Robbie Anderson, out wide.
DJ
They
Moore out
could
wide too.
they could pick a receiver here, but
But yeah,
I think they go defense here because I think they're
I think so.
fine
Yeah.
offensively with Darnold, McCaffrey, the receivers they already have, and then Bridgewater as a backup, if Darnold struggles. But I think that this is the first pick where I think it should be defense.
Yeah. I mean, I think the again, the unfortunate part for everybody kind of sitting in the top 15 here is that there's really no elite pass rusher. There's no Chase Youngs, and then that kind of really stings for a lot of teams because you can always use an elite pass rusher. So I don't think you're going to see that, but I think this is where a perfect guy like Micah Parsons, who is an absolute elite prospect, and again, he started off this kind of draft process being like a top 5 talent. Now, obviously, quarterbacks kind of inflate that, and they're always picked first. That's just kind of how it goes in the NFL draft. But I think people are sleeping on Micah Parsons a little bit from a fan's perspective. I don't think GMs are, so I think this is the perfect spot for that first defender to go.
Yeah, and they already got the quarterback. Like they were top 10. You were thinking maybe they move up a little bit. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
are part of a trade for, Garoppolo or a Matt Ryan, but they ended up getting Sam Darnold, and we'll see what that turns into. I personally like Sam. I think Sam,
Yeah.
he deserves some of the blame in New York, but not all of it,
Mm-hmm.
not the majority of it. I think that the Jets just completely failed him. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good to have a fresh start. You got a 23-year-old quarterback. Treat him like a rookie. Let's see how he does. If Darnold comes in, if I'm the Panthers, the first thing I said was just wipe your memory just completely clean. Just like Men in Black style, wipe
Yeah.
the memory completely. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
just start. You're 23, your first year here. Let's just act like it's your rookie year, even though
Yeah.
you are due for a payday sooner than real rookies
Yeah.
would be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have top 5 running back. You have a pretty decent receiving core. You have a veteran quarterback in Bridgewater that's going to help you and probably not threaten your job unless you personally suck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that defense. I think Parsons would be probably a good spot in that selection.
Definitely.
9. Let's just go through until we get to the Giants. 9,
Yeah.
since that's what this is turned into.
I figured that.
Organically. Broncos. Broncos are very weird to me because the Broncos, who are led by John Elway, are they still led by John Elway or did he
Yeah.
leave? They
He took
can't
like
find
a
a
different
quarterback.
role, but he's still there. Yeah.
They can't. A Hall of Fame quarterback can't find a
Can't
quarterback.
find a
That's very
quarterback.
odd to me.
Mm-hmm.
So they're at a spot at 9 where maybe they can get Trey Lance if they feel like he's like a guy that at the top in
Mm-hmm.
top 10. The top 4 quarterbacks probably won't be there. They need a quarterback. That's their glaring miss, right? That's their
Mm-hmm.
glaring weakness and glaring hole in their roster. Do you see them going back? Do you see them trading up with Atlanta maybe? What do you think Atlanta does here?
I mean I think like you said a trade back could benefit them, especially if Parsons comes off the board. I think that would make them trade back kind of that scenario even greater. Now, obviously, you could say, all right, let's just get Rashawn Slater and just kind of shore up that offensive line to try to help Drew Lock. But I don't think they don't owe Drew Lock anything. And the reason I say is because he was a second round pick, and in the NFL, you pretty much you give some longevity to your first round picks, maybe unless you're the Cardinals with Josh Rosen. But after the first round picks, it's like 2 to 7. It doesn't really matter. Everything's kind of expendable.
Yeah,
So
Hackenberg never played for the Jets.
exactly. So it's like if they see Trey Lance there or Mac Jones, whatever quarterback kind of falls to that spot, and Denver's like, listen, we have an opportunity right now to get a quarterback to try to shore up this team because we're not going to go anywhere without one. Then maybe they do that, and I think that's where if you see a guy like Trey Lance who's different than Drew Lock, where maybe Mac Jones is a little more similar, I think that could maybe get John Elway a little bit more excited. Maybe getting someone who's different than who they've usually gotten will maybe kind of fix their issue.
I mean, you look at Elway and you look at this great quarterback over his career, and then you see the quarterbacks he's taken, like Drew Lock and He had
Osweiler,
Osweiler play some
Paxton
games, and
Lynch.
Paxton Lynch. Like, it just never works out. Even if they do trade up for a quarterback, or they trade down and they wait for Lance, do we trust John Elway to make the right decision? Like, are we
No,
getting to that
no
point?
shot. Yeah, I mean, you absolutely. I mean, like we just named three guys who are basically carbon copies of just themselves, and none of which have panned out. And we've seen with our GMs and our coaches that if you miss on one quarterback, GM and head coach are gone. But for some reason, John Elway is still there in some sort of managerial position.
Yeah, this is the one pick where I genuinely don't know what's going to happen. We don't even
Yeah.
know. First of all, we don't know what trades will happen before, if trades happen
Yeah.
before this pick even happens. But I don't. I look at this team, and the glaring hole is quarterback. I just don't know if there would be quarterbacks for them to take at 9 that are worth the 9th overall pick in the draft. I think this is where you can see them trade back. I also think you could probably maybe see them trade with Atlanta to get to 4 if they're desperate enough, if they
Yeah.
really believe in Mac Jones enough. I think they probably should have been in on where the Niners went to. I think they should have been on that Dolphins 3 pick. I think
Yeah.
that because if they could have went up there and they could have gotten a Justin Fields, I think it's a very different narrative about how we feel about the Broncos organization. I don't know if they were involved in the negotiations for that 3 pick. They obviously didn't do enough because it went to San Francisco. But maybe now that I'm speaking, maybe they're in on Jimmy G. Maybe that's something that could work in Denver. But they definitely need a quarterback.
It came out that they were in on Stafford, and the
Yeah.
deal they allegedly offered him or offered to the Lions was terrible. They didn't even offer Drew Lock, and they didn't even offer that number 9 pick. So two things that obviously the Lions were going to be looking for in return, you didn't give up. So clearly the Lions said absolutely not,
as they should have.
like hell no. So makes you wonder, how serious are they, I guess, about getting a quarterback?
I don't know. I just know that next year it's not a heavy quarterback draft. So if they want a quarterback, if they want a young quarterback to develop on their own, it's this year. Unless they're looking at a long rebuild where you look into 2023 draft. But I don't know. I don't know where this team goes next. And they were so good for so long with Peyton and that defense. And then ever since then, they've really bottomed out. And that's because they didn't have a quarterback after Peyton Manning. They thought it'd be, they traded Osweiler immediately. They didn't give him a chance. I don't know. I don't know with them.
Yeah.
Now to number 10, the Cowboys. Now they have a quarterback. They paid him a lot of money. He got hurt last year. They probably would have won the division had he stayed healthy. And I'm talking about Dak Prescott. They took a receiver, CeeDee Lamb in the first round last year. So I'm not sure they're going to go quarterback route. They might go Pitts if he's there, because that's a tight end and that's different. I don't know who their tight end is now. Witten's been gone for a couple years now. So maybe if Pitts falls, they'll take him. But where do we think the Cowboys are going to go? Because I think going into the year, they're probably, if healthy, the favorite to win the NFC East.
Yeah, I think definitely too. But I think what's stopping them from being the favorite in the NFC overall is their defense. I think their defense is just terrible. And again, like you said, if Kyle Pitts falls to them, yes, that's awesome. But you took that best player available last year in CeeDee Lamb, a position of need that you didn't really need. But you said, hey, listen, we're going to get this guy. And he balled out and the offense balled out. But you can't be losing games 50 to 45 every time. It's not going to do anything for you. You actually need to start winning, not just scoring points. And we all know scoring is awesome, but if your defense is trash, there's nothing you can do. And that's where I had in both my mock drafts, Patrick Surtain going to the Cowboys. I think cornerback is their number one position of need, and he's one of the best cornerback prospects to come out of the draft within the last at least 3 years that I can remember. So it just seems like a layup pick right here. But Jerry Jones, you obviously know he likes offense, so who knows with him. So
he always goes flashy. Like, he's always going to go with who the
sell
biggest
some tickets,
team is.
sell some jerseys. Yeah.
Yeah. They couldn't cover last year. So I think you're
Mhm.
right. This mock draft I have in front of me has JC Horn going to the Cowboys at 10.
Mhm.
It's just who you like better at that point.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
whatever cornerback they like, they'll probably take whatever secondary guy. Because again, yeah, they do need to cover. You think that maybe the Giants will take a receiver, and even if they don't, they brought in Galladay.
Mhm.
Um, the Eagles. I mean, I'm trying to think of, the weapons that they have. Um,
Eagles
Washington.
not much.
There's not much, but when you talk about the other upper echelon teams in the NFC, you got to cover their best guys. You got to cover
Yeah.
um, the guys that Tom Brady has. You got to cover Devontae Adams in Green Bay when you get to the playoffs,
Mhm.
or you're dead.
Yeah.
Um, let's do a couple more. The Giants at 11. I've been banging on the drum for the wide receiver over the course of the last couple months. They got Galladay, and even then, I said get the receiver. I still feel that way, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to be as upset as I thought I would be if they don't do that. I still want the receiver if they're there, but I do look at that defensive line, and I would be fine with getting an edge rusher because I do think
Mhm.
they need someone that's going to rush the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of my feelings on the Giants too. And again, obviously, the Galladay signing didn't seem like enough at the time, but when you're looking at the Giants only having the option of say one out of the four elite pass catchers, maybe it's not the one that they really are in love with, and maybe there's an you're going to have your pick of just about every edge rusher, so maybe that kind of excites them even more, and that's where you would kind of have to say, listen, we're not going to get the sexier offensive pick who's going to score touchdowns, but hey, stopping touchdowns is equally as important and sacking the
Mhm.
quarterback too. So I think, like you said, I think a lot of other Giants fans will feel that way and just be like, listen, it isn't who we originally wanted, but we can live with it once he kind of starts getting around the quarterback and making sure we're not letting up 35 points a game.
Yeah, I mean Galladay, he's going to be the one, and he
Yeah.
has the ability to be a one if he's at his best. And you got Slayton.
Mhm.
I don't hate Slayton, but my argument was that you don't not take a receiver like these
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
appease Slayton's feelings and appease his playing time. I don't think he's good. He's not good enough to
Mhm.
do that. Um, you're not
Yeah.
Pitts, as I said before, it's redundant because you have Ingram. For as much
Yeah.
as Ingram frustrates the fan base, he is still a first round pick. And having two first round pick tight ends just feels redundant to me. I
Mhm.
know the Patriots did it for years and years, but
Yeah,
the
but
Giants aren't
that's
the
the
Patriots.
pay is separate. Mhm.
Um, yeah, I just think they have a good secondary, the Giants do. But the
Yeah.
thing about having a good secondary is that the best secondary in the world is going to crack if the quarterback has a year and a half to throw the ball on
Mhm.
every play. And that's where the Giants kind of fall short. If they get a dominant pass rusher, that's going to make your secondary better because the quarterback's not going to have time, and that's going to be less time for your cornerbacks and your safeties to cover, and that's going to keep them in shape. They're not going to be exhausted because they're
Mhm.
covering a receiver for 10, 12 seconds at a time every play. So sure, let's get an edge guy. I like if they get a receiver, I'll jump up and down. I'll be thrilled because I think
Yeah.
if you put Galladay, Smith, Ingram, Barkley, Shepard in the slot, I think that's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous receiving core for Daniel Jones. But it's not the end of the world if they don't do that and instead get the pass rusher to help that defense because um, the Giants, what do the Giants win their Super Bowls on? They win the Super Bowl when they have Lawrence Taylor, when they have Michael Strahan, when they have Justin Tuck, when they had a young Jason Pierre-Paul. That's when they win those Super Bowls. So this CBS Sports mock draft has Zaven
Mhm.
Collins as their choice. Who's your top edge rusher in the draft?
So my top edge rusher would probably be Jalen Phillips out of Miami. Again, I think he's like 6'4", 6'5", something like that.
Mhm.
He's got some medical red flags, some concussion stuff like that, but he's an absolute artist when it comes to his pass rush moves. And I think you pair him next to Leonard Williams, obviously teach him a couple things, obviously try to stay healthy, but that's something that everybody in the NFL is battling. So the medicals aren't really too much to stop me. And again, it's either him or I would even say then Kwity Paye. Both, I think you can't really go wrong. You have two absolute monster of human beings that you fine tune a little bit, and it's going to make their lives a lot easier when they're paired up next to Leonard Williams, who's probably going to be occupying a lot of double teams. So I think it's a perfect storm for anybody coming in there. And I think those are guys who are going to start immediately on your roster. And when you're picking at number 11, that's what you want. You don't want kind of you want a guy who's too much of a project who's going to be a depth piece right away. No, you want someone who's going to impact your team right away.
Moving on to 12, we'll do the Eagles at 12. We'll skip down to the Dolphins at 18, and then we'll wrap this up because we're pushing that
Sounds
hour.
Good.
The Eagles need a ton of shit, right? They get rid of Wentz. They're gonna go with Jalen Hurts. I like Jalen Hurts. Some Eagles fans like him. Some Eagles fans that I know don't like him. So we'll see what happens at the quarterback position, which is obviously most important. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of other holes on this roster. So this CBS Sports draft has Surtain dropping to them. Do you think this is a team that's going to go defense secondary, or do you think that, maybe one of the wide receivers falls to them? That was kind of what one Eagles fan that I'm friends with said when they made the trade, dropping out of the top 10. Why would they do this now they can't get the receiver? I think we said last week that, a receiver's not saving them this year. So why would you take one now? But where do you think, because this is basically ground zero at this point, you're building the Eagles up from scratch now. Where do you think the best choice would be for the Eagles, a team that is basically restarting fresh with a new coach, with a new quarterback? Everything's new. What would the first course of action be to get this Eagles team back to where they were in 2017?
I think for them, especially, again, you have a young quarterback, and we keep talking about all the time. Anytime you have a young quarterback, you want to give him some time. You want to give him some confidence in the pocket. And if a guy like Slater is there, I think you draft the second best offensive tackle in this draft class. Again, can't really go wrong with that. You're investing in your quarterback by investing in this guy. And then you're also investing in the run game. You have this one position is going to make so many other things on the offense better. And that, I think it makes the most sense. And again, you obviously have to look at, see what are the Giants doing. They re-signed Leonard Williams. They are possibly going to pick up an edge rusher too. Now, who's going to block those guys and protect Jalen Hurts? And that's where I would go with Rashawn Slater.
Yeah. You got to protect Hurts because Hurts can't run around for his life. That was the problem with Wentz, right? They didn't really protect him. And then Wentz, his talent level or his performance just completely dropped. So you got to make sure you don't make the same mistake with Wentz that you make with Jalen Hurts or whoever your quarterback of the future is going to be. There's just so many problems with this organization that whoever they pick, it's still a multiple year rebuild that this team. No, they have no cap space. They tried to get Galladay. They just couldn't afford him. I love it because I hate Philadelphia, but
of course, yes,
it's sad for Philadelphia fans, because this was a team that for a little while ago won the Super Bowl and then completely fell off the table. So get that lineman. That's always a safe bet to draft. It's always
I think so too.
You can never have too many offensive linemen, and if you draft a lineman, the fan base can never complain because that's just such a safe pick. And I think that's what the Eagles need to do right now is to play it safe, build it, albeit boring. Sometimes boring is the way to go. So I think I can get down with that. All right, let's do 18. We're going to skip all the way to 18, the Dolphins, and then we'll wrap up this show. So we have the Dolphins going with Waddle at 6. Now you're at 18. Do you, as we talked about briefly, do you do running back and get 2 offensive players to help out Tua, or do you switch to the other side of the ball, go defense, go edge, go corner, go safety? Where you feeling at 18? Because 18 almost like a free pick, almost like,
Yeah.
just you won the lottery. And you can
Mhm.
you can do whatever at this point because you got what you wanted at 6. You have a ton of stuff later in the draft and in other years down the road. 18 really seems like an opportunity to take a little bit of a risk. And if it
Mhm.
fails, whatever.
Yeah. And what is the quote? It's like those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. Something
That's it.
along those lines. So, for any Dolphins fans listening, we all know very well that last year we missed out on J.K. Dobbins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor. We missed out on Cam Akers. We missed out on every possible running back because we kept saying, "Hey, we'll wait a little bit. We'll wait a little bit. We'll wait a little bit. We'll wait a little bit." Bang! J.K. Dobbins got picked one pick in front of our second rounder. I don't think they can afford to do that this year. And you look at there's probably 3 of top tier running backs. I would even say ETNA and Najee Harris are kind of in a league of their own in front of Javonte Williams. So there's a lot of other kind of running back needy teams. I mean, again, you look at Tampa Bay, they could snag one. The Steelers could snag one. The Bills could snag one if they want to at the end, all at the end of the first round. The Dolphins cannot miss out on one of the top 2 premier running backs. And again, Najee Harris has been my guy since day one. So I have to roll with that. I have to keep the Alabama kind of reunion going. And like you said, you have some more flexibility to choose a position that may be a little more unconventional in the first round because you have 2 first rounders. So, and again, you're picking right again at 36. So 18 to 36, it's like why not just get him at 18 if you were going to say get him at 36? And a lot of Dolphin fans like, oh, that's too early. It's this, that, and the other. What if the Dolphins pick was not at 18? What if it was at say 22 or 23? Does that sound better to get a running back? And the answer is probably yes. So who cares with the extra 4 to 5 picks in between? You see him at 18, you want a good guy in this draft class, you go get him.
I mean, yeah, if you want a running back, like I didn't like the Barkley pick because the Giants were at 2.
2, yeah.
Eli was getting up there in age. He wasn't the same
Mm-hmm.
player anymore. And the Giants, they had 2, and then that's it. They had to wait all the way until their second round pick, wherever that was. Here, you're at 6. You're gonna get your pass catcher. You're at 18. Like you'd be happy if you went from 6 to 36. Like you'd be that's cool. Like right.
Yeah.
That, that's a quick turnaround in and of itself. You throw
Mm-hmm.
in 18 in the middle, as I said before, it's almost like a get out of jail free card. It's almost like, a free pick.
Yeah.
You could take a risk and probably reach for a running back that you normally wouldn't get if the 18th pick in the first round was the only first round pick you had. Now, with 36 and with 6, you're going to have that sandwiched into 18. Yeah, get the running back. Like, why not?
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is he's not that great, and you can still say you had a very good draft with who you got at 6 and who you got at 36 and who you got, with all the other picks that you have, and then also next year's picks. So,
yeah.
So you have Tua, you get Waddle, you get the running back, and then at 36, then you go defense, maybe. All of a sudden, you have a pretty complete roster.
I mean, at this point, you have to. I feel like with the amount of money you spent and the amount of draft picks and
being 11-5 already.
Yeah. So
having
you talk
a pretty favorable schedule in 2022, 2021.
Yeah, I think they have like the 5th easiest schedule right now.
I mean, you're sitting pretty. I mean,
I think so too. Yeah.
And you can afford, because of how well the Dolphins organization's been run and how they've fleeced the NFL into having this capital that is unheard of. Like you see this once every 7-8 years. Like you never really see an organization with all these picks. I mean, you can afford to take a first round running back, which has kind of become taboo over the last few years because, running backs have kind of been pushed aside in terms of value and in terms of importance in today's NFL. But it always helps to have that star running back, because if you have a good running back that opens up the play action pass opens up opportunities for your Jalen Waddle bomb. I mean, that's a perfect scenario right there for the Dolphins.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
And then it just
I'm all
turns
for that.
into, is Tua the guy?
Hmm.
And that will be the biggest question. You don't need to ask the question of, do they have the people around him?
No,
Is
yeah,
there
it's all set in stone.
is their receiving core good enough? Do they have a running back that's going to have the offensive line respect the run?
Hmm.
Because if you have all that, Tua can let it fly, and then it's sink or swim.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a perfect situation to be in. Again, we keep talking about it's not okay to kind of sit in the middle, and especially you don't want to be sitting in the middle with your quarterback. So if you can get a full 100% evaluation on Tua sooner than later, I'm all for that. And then again, if you have to move on from him in 2 or 3 years, opposed to 6, 7, or 8 years, then again, it just you don't go into that forced rebuild. You can
Yeah, and
kind
then
of
if
it's a
you
little
have
more
to move on,
organic.
which hopefully we
Yeah,
won't, because we both think Tua is great. We think he's
yeah.
a good kid. So we hope he's successful in the NFL. But like, let's say, for example, he doesn't, right? And you have to get rid of him either next year or the year after. You have a ready-made roster for that quarterback to step in and be successful. So the Dolphins aren't going to have to reset the entire franchise if Tua doesn't work out.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
because your offense is going to be built and you just need the
Yes.
quarterback, kind of like Brady, kind of what the Buccaneers did, because when the roster, other than Gronk and Antonio Brown, the roster was pretty set, right?
Hmm.
And it was just that Winston wasn't working. So
Yeah.
Winston leaves, Brady comes in, they win a Super Bowl immediately because the roster's there. So the Dolphins can follow that similar blueprint if, per se, Tua doesn't work, Tua leaves, you bring in whoever would be available via
Just
trade,
yeah.
via
Anybody.
free agent, and you go for it that way. So
Hmm.
we'll see what happens, but best case scenario, hopefully, is that Tua is awesome, because
Yes.
I think we all like Tua. Except I hope
Yes.
Tua all the success in the world, except when they play the Giants this year, because they
That's fair.
expanded the
That's fair.
season.
Yes.
So for that game, Tua could be terrible for all I care.
Sounds good.
But other than that, I hope Tua is great, and I think that the Dolphins are going to help him out this year. Before we go, is there a pick? Is there a team we didn't get to that you want to briefly touch upon that interests you?
I think Chicago. I think again, do they get crazy and really try to trade up with the Falcons for a quarterback? And we know they offered 3 first rounders to Seattle for Wilson. Do they get desperate and crazy? Because again, we know Andy Dalton is not the answer. So we'll see what they do. And again, I'm very interested to see if that is the biggest splash is with Chicago trading up to try to get a quarterback.
I think it's funny you mentioned that, because I was driving home a couple days ago, and my old radio shows from college are in my phone, but I never really
Mhm.
listen to them. I normally just skip them because I would rather
Yeah.
listen to my music, and I don't like listening to
Yeah.
myself, especially
Hmm.
recordings from 4 or 5 years ago. So this
Yeah.
one demo tape that I made 5 years ago came on my iPhone, and I was like, yeah, I'll listen to it. 5 years ago, I swear, 5 years ago, 2016, and I
Mhm.
go on a rant about how bad Andy Dalton is. And that's
There it
5 years,
is.
like 5 years ago. And now, 5 years later, out of college, two organizations later, because he was at the Bengals on the time, he went to the Cowboys, now he's in the Bears,
Mhm.
and he's still getting these opportunities. And it doesn't make sense to me.
$10 million.
And you got younger guys like Mariota and Rosen,
Mhm.
right? These younger guys that never really got a shot in the NFL,
Mhm.
they get passed over for this 12-year vet in Andy Dalton, who's, I mean, he was good at his best,
But
but
just
he was never top 10 quarterback in the league.
nah, I
I
barely
don't
even top 12. It's
I don't
just
just it's unfortunate. He never won a playoff game.
same
Remember Cincinnati would always make the playoffs but always lose.
make
It's like
it, but
Marvin
just
Lewis's
yeah.
thing that they would always like
Mhm.
be one and done in the playoffs if they ever made it. So
Mhm.
yeah, Andy Dalton, man. I don't know what blackmail he has on the NFL and all these teams, but for him to keep getting
He's getting
starting
keeps getting
quarterback
paid.
opportunities doesn't make sense to me. And what he did in Dallas did not warrant him to get the QB1 in Chicago. And that tweet was hilarious that Chicago
Oh
made.
my god.
To
Oh
like
my
they thought they did
god.
something. They thought they were going to pump up Chicago with that
No.
tweet. Instead, they
Chicago
got
does not
completely
does
roasted.
not love you right now.
I just wish that
Terrible.
I don't know who gave that social media manager the authorization to hit send on that one, because
He might be. Yeah, he or she might be looking for a new job.
I think they're looking for a new career because I don't think Twitter's working for them.
Definitely not.
But yeah, Chicago, they're at 20. Trubisky's out. Dalton's in. I don't know. I thought another team that could have probably used that 3 pick, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We'll see what happens. I don't know what to do with Chicago because they got to compete with the Packers, and again, they do have a playoff roster. They did make the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky.
Mm-hmm.
You would want to see what they could do if they had an actual quarterback under center and
anybody else,
like literally anybody, like you or me.
Yeah.
Not really. But we'll see. This draft's 2 weeks from now, as I said in the beginning of the show. 2 weeks. We'll do another show before the draft.
Yeah, right before the draft.
Final mock draft of the first round. I think that'll be fun.
Sounds good.
But until then, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of rumors, and I wouldn't be surprised if some deals are made between now and when the Jaguars are officially on the clock.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that'll just about do it for Ice the Kicker. For Matt Ferrara, my name is Glen Denegris. We'll be back in a couple weeks to preview officially the first round of the NFL draft. But until then, we'll see you later and enjoy the rest of your week.